help people recognize, reframe, and reset.
Do you want to tell that story?
I'll let you tell that story.
Hence the On Your Mind podcast. Welcome back to On Your Mind podcast, where I'm delighted to introduce a very special guest today. Christine Wenger is the founder of Rewire and Thrive Coaching. She's the founder of a movement called Mindfulness at Toyota. And I can relate to her story a lot because she's a high performer, she's a working mom, and she's learned so much on her own personal journey that she's been able to bring into her professional work as well. So we'll dive in today with Christine, and as we frame this conversation thinking about it in terms of that pillar of brain health, stress management. So, Christine, I'm so happy you're here. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Dorsey.
Yeah, we've been, known each other for a few years now, and I know you professionally, but also as a friend. Mm-hmm. And we're joking this episode might go on for hours, but we'll try.
It's possible. It's possible.
We'll try for that not to happen. I'm going to be quiet and let you do the talking, which is why I'd love for you to share a little bit about your relationship with stress management, your personal story. Tell us a little more.
Yeah, I think part of our conversation today when you and I started talking was a little bit around how stress can be this early warning signal for us of what might be off for us. Number of years ran very high performing teams, high expectations for myself, like many of working parents out there, and just didn't stop, kept going. And as I'm reflected back after many years, it brought me to a new stage within my experience and really looking at how stress shows up in our bodies, and love to talk more with you around that early warning signal.
That sounds great, Christine. And you make a really good point that you can interpret stress not necessarily negatively. You can see it as a warning sign.
Yes. I mean, if there isn't, I think we all thought that stress is good or bad. So let's put it that way, that it's bad. And I'm here to talk a little bit about how it also is good to get us out of bed in the morning, mm-hmm. to help us get excited, to learn something new, and really to harness how our brains can grow and build that resiliency to learn new things.
Love that. So when we think about stress management, it's almost like harnessing stress as a tool for growth.
Definitely. And then using your signals within your body to understand where maybe you've pushed a little too far.
Mm-hmm. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube page at Dorsey Standish for all episodes of On Your Mind. And follow me on social media at Dorsey Standish. So you're sitting before me, really accomplished and also grounded human. That maybe wasn't always the case. Can you talk a little bit about your personal breaking point and how you discovered some of your personal stress signals?
Yeah, it was about 14, 15 years ago. I went to pick up my kids from daycare and I was bent over at the waist, and a girlfriend sent me to the ER. I wish we had iPhones back then to have the picture of it. But in the mirror, I looked like I was standing straight up in my head. And so that's what was this really eye-opening space for me and started me down the journey to go, what happened? So after that ER visit, I spent 5 years powering in and out of doctor's appointments and medication, and then feeling better and then dropping back to it. I didn't realize that was so much a turning point for me at the time until I looked back on it and we've talked about reflecting back a little bit more. And it was my body telling me I was overstressed. It really forced me to look at it different. I mean, I'm sure your listeners can relate to being a high functioning, always juggling these different plates as a working parent, as trying to be a high professional. And that's kind of what it was, and didn't realize that I tipped a sense.
Yeah, the juxtaposition of you kind of thinking you're standing straight up, holding it all together, and really you're bent over at the waist. Your girlfriend's like, you're not okay. And you were juggling a lot of balls or a lot of plates, as you like to say, between taking care of your kids and your family and working and a high stress career. So I think that is really relatable, that oftentimes we don't even take that pause to look at ourselves and sense inwards and realize that there's something here that we need to be aware of.
Yeah, very much. And, I think as I started understanding it a little bit more, realizing what was happening in my body, then I became more in tune to where I might be showing little cracks along the way. I'd catch myself holding my breath even in a conversation with someone at work, and or being really tight up in my shoulders and neck area, and not realizing that at all. And so holding on to that stress, and so much of the research shows us now, we hold emotion in our bodies. And how do we learn to release it?
Yeah. And you described it so well here that, you had this sort of crisis moment of getting sent to the ER. And then it took you 5 years of kind of experimenting, figuring things out. It wasn't a just aha moment where all of a sudden your back was fine and everything was good. It took you a lot of trial and error. And I hear you talking about self-awareness in terms of your breath, in terms of your stress signals. Can you talk a little bit more about mindfulness and neuroscience and how those things have helped you in your journey?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I think part of, you ask, why did it take me so long to kind of figure some of that out? It felt normal. If I was talking to any of my colleagues or any of my friends, we're all kind of doing the same thing. So that high stress environment of juggling the house, work, kids, friends, and family, everybody was doing it. And I think that's why I couldn't really see it. But what got frustrating was bouncing in and out of that, and not quite getting to a spot that felt like I was, on a path moving forward. And so that journey is what took me into discovering mindfulness. I took a class with UCLA back on pain management and understanding how our brains really hold on to pain. And the really cool thing is, they used to think that our brains stopped developing. You're going to know this even better than me, at 25. And now we know, thank goodness, that we can rewire our brains for different way of thinking and different patterns that we can bring forth. And that's part of what I started doing, was understanding from mindfulness and more self-awareness of what I could do different that would just lower that stress.
Those are amazing tools. And what I love about your story is you didn't just implement it in your own life. You found a way to bring it to others. So let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to hear some more tools for resilience and more about the movement that you started at Toyota.
Sounds good.
To learn more about today's guest and her books, you can check out Christine Wenger's website, rewireandthrivecoaching.com. And you can also join me in following her amazing posts on LinkedIn. All right. So Christine, I can't tell you enough how much I resonate with that, being overwhelmed, but not even realizing it because everybody else around you is overwhelmed. So when you say words like mindfulness and self-awareness, for some high performers that are at that breaking point right now, they might be like, can you get specific? Can you give me some specific concrete ways that you did things differently to replace that stress with new habits?
Yeah, absolutely. And I get that. I like to talk about it as being more of a formal practice and informal practice so that I can find ways to integrate it into my day. I really started out reading and just kind of learning and understanding about it and understanding what our brain's doing. And that's like, oh, wait, this isn't me. It's kind of like how our brains are wired. And so when I looked at it that way, I started really, really small. And what I would do is after my morning workouts, I would pause and do 1 minute of just breathing. I know it sounds ridiculously small, but the consistency is actually what helped. And then I ended up moving on days that I knew were going to be stressful. Like maybe I was going to have a presentation that I needed to do or talk differently, meeting with a more critical conversation. I upped my mindfulness minutes, as I'll call them, from 1 to 2. All I did was double, right? And so again, ridiculously small, but very consistent. And so that helped. And it was it wasn't immediate. It was like a couple of weeks later, a light switch had gone off and that started happening. The other piece is I kind of talked a little bit earlier about noticing this like tension in my shoulders or holding my breath. The one way I found to help myself there, to kind of force a pause of thinking, was to say, So sometimes people will hear me say it out loud. I mean, try it yourself. You're going to say, you can't help but like sit back in your chair. Right? You can't. It's just, it just does it naturally for you. So integrating that into my day or thinking and pausing just a second before I answer somebody just released a little bit of what was happening for me in my shoulders. Again, ridiculously small in there. Other ways was, we know movement, so we kind of talk about, and you and I have had these conversations, that emotions are stored in our bodies. We've got to get them out at times. So however that is, walking, running, exercising, crying, all of that are different ways to release. And those are also things that I integrated as well, even if it was 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, that's an amazing stress management toolkit right there. Moving, getting it out. I read an article recently that was like, if you walk 30 minutes a day, most of your problems will be solved. It's like,
yes,
keep it simple, which is the theme I hear from you of 1 minute of breathing. You know, my story, very similar, but I love that you bundled it in with an existing habit too. You did it after your morning workout. On some days you doubled it to 2 minutes. That's really relatable and accessible for most people. Most of us have 2 minutes in our 1,440 minutes a day to just breathe.
So I tell working moms, like I've talked about this before, I tell working moms, especially even working parents, go into the bathroom, close the door, and that is your 1 minute. Like sometimes we've got kids hanging off of us. Sometimes we've got, demanding partners, whatnot. How can you carve out that 1 minute, even if you hide in the bathroom or the closet?
And it sounds like that 1 minute was your formal anchor of like, I do this every day. And that snowballed into pauses throughout the day where you could drop your shoulders or relax your breath or pause for that moment before jumping back into a conversation. And it sounds like you use that even internally when you notice your thinking or stress coming up, you use it internally of to pause.
So I need those like visual cues, or sometimes it'll be a Post-it note on my monitor, just to remind me to take that minute, or to ask a question. That kind of just gets me out of whatever emotion or tension is happening. And having a conversation with other people can also shift us from stress in our bodies to thinking about others, and talking with others is another way that interaction can help.
Yeah. And you're bringing up these other pillars of brain health, as I call them: movement, social connection, how they can build on one another and support each other in this mission to reduce stress. So, what I love so much about your story, Christine, is that you went through this experience yourself, the trial and error. You start implementing this small practice, and pretty soon you're like, I got to share this with my folks at Toyota. So talk a little bit about the shift from making it a personal practice to your work scaling it to mindfulness at Toyota, and maybe include a bit in there for leaders or even parents who are leaders of their family. How did you take your personal inspiration and share it in a meaningful way with those around you?
Yeah. So it's an interesting story. I was with the company. We relocated from California to Texas. And in that move was a major shift for people. And it was really, really hard. We'd been at one location for a long time. And in that, I noticed that a lot of my colleagues were really struggling. And it popped this idea of how could we look at it different? And because of my mindfulness practice that I'd had, I had met a couple of executives and just pitched a small thing, said, what about, looking at this in a different way? How can we help people? And I got the go ahead for a pilot group. I needed 100 people, and just to kind of test it out. Well, I sent an email on a Friday afternoon to a few thousand people, and I had 500 sign up in less than an hour. So I knew I was on to something.
On Friday afternoon.
On a Friday afternoon, right? So I knew I was on to something. That was back in 2019. I say we happened to be right place, right time during COVID. And our numbers and interest just skyrocketed. And it really started out of just sharing a little lesson or a little bit learning about the brain or maybe some research, and then giving a 5-minute practice. And over time, it spread. We had more and more people within the company participating, joining. It really started out as more of a raise your hand and come, volunteer whenever you wanted. I'm pleased to say through a lot of not only that work, but also gathering feedback and measuring the impact from team member kind of sentiment, but also the numbers of people, the quantity of people joining us. I was able to position with human resources within the company that we should offer a meditation app as part of our benefits package. And today that's still there, 6 years later. And so taking it, I scaled. I knew I couldn't do it all. I scaled within the company by talking with other interested people and created this mindfulness champions group. I modeled it after other large organizations. So LinkedIn, Meta, Google all had a lot of this set up within their organizations. And I did a lot of calls and said, how could I bring something like this into the company? And that's kind of where I started experimenting, truly.
I want to know what's on your mind. If you have any questions for me or my guests, or you have a guest you'd like me to interview, you can DM me directly on Instagram at Dorsey Standish, or send me an email at hello@dorseystandish.com. That's so great to hear, Christine. And what I'm hearing is you took exactly your experience, the science, the short practices, and you figured out a way to bring it to your people. And you made the really important point of getting sponsorship from leaders and executives and measuring it and continuing to improve and meet people where they are, even as the world continued to change, whether it was moving across the country or moving to remote work, you were there as a resource and support system. I absolutely love that. And I think it was probably right around that time you moved here, 2020, that we connected for the first time as we were talking about how you could scale mindfulness at Toyota. I know I helped you with some of the curriculums and some of the neuroscience. And it was really quickly, as I heard your story, first, I started with a few minutes a day. And then I took what I loved, which was science, short practice, and figured out how could I package that for companies in a relatable way. So I remember meeting you, hearing your facilitation journey, and just being so struck that we had both had these parallel paths, but found what worked for us. And then, wow, it works for other type A high achievers in the corporate world. So I'm curious what your thoughts are, but at this point in our work with Mastermind, we've expanded. So I mentioned these 6 pillars of brain health. Companies are bringing us in now, not just for meditation classes, but for nutrition offerings. I've been doing a lot of team building that at its core, there's some mindfulness. There's definitely emotional intelligence, resilience there, but I almost sneak it in. I don't even necessarily mention those words because I think we all need this stuff, but sometimes people may not be willing to come to a mindfulness class or a meditation class. So I'm curious, just in your day-to-day work, I know you just started leading a new group. How do you insert some of these inspirational mindful moments that you wouldn't necessarily consider it mindfulness, like seeing the whole person or helping other people shift the way they think about leadership?
So I love the parallels as we keep talking. As I think about it, I too, at times, have changed language and not always used it as mindfulness. And the reason that is because it can shut people off and not, or not quite understand it at times. However, the other element that I look at is most organizations are going through lots of large change and transformation. This is all about using emotional intelligence to build resilience. So you ask, how can leaders kind of integrate this into their teams? It's not just asking, did you get the work done today? It's asking about, how did you get the work done? Perhaps, do you need some help today? Do I need to buddy you up because it's been a stressful time period? Or have I given you too much on your plate that I need to look to balance that to somebody else? That's what leaders can watch for. And to me, that helps to build these muscles we have, because change is constant and it continues. And that's the most that's happening inside organizations, and leaders can really help to create these more safe environments for team members to bring their whole selves to work.
You're getting at so many themes like psychological safety. And sometimes it's just that extra 30 seconds to say, how was your weekend? Sometimes I've been doing a lot of team building trainings recently, whether it's a construction site or a corporate office, and I always incorporate lunch. So you and I just had lunch beforehand. It seems like a small thing, but I think a quarter of Americans eat all their meals alone every day. That's sad. Our society is shifting so much, and in remote or hybrid work environments, like I know you're familiar with, that extra moment of social connection, seeing the whole person. Your mindful pause could be an internal and then, hey, how are you really?
Yes.
Like, what's going on? Is there a reason this project is slipping? Not why the heck is this project slipping? So it's almost like that personal mindfulness sets the stage for you to have that extra moment of patience and connection with other humans and help them feel safe and supported at work.
Very much. I feel for leaders right now, being one of them myself. There's always this pressure to do more with less. And so sometimes, and I'm guilty as charged many, many years ago, where it's just, let's get it done and keep focusing on that. And I really like what you said. We have to look at, how do we ask about the whole person, whether it is having lunch with them, whether it's a phone call, whether it's stopping by their desk if you're physically in an office situation. How do you check in?
Thank you so much for those thoughts, Christine, and the relatable, being asked to do more with less. How the heck do I have time? But it just takes a moment or a walk and talk phone call, or taking that extra bit to be fully human and see people as the same. So I love that. So tell me a little bit more as we wrap up here. Tell us a little bit more about Rewire and Thrive Coaching, the books that you've released recently. How can people connect with you and follow your work in this space?
Yes. So they can go to Rewire and Thrive Coaching, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Christine Wenger. I have written a couple of books. Well, second one's coming out in 2 weeks. That one is titled Friends and Coworkers, Finding Community at Work. So I look forward to coming back. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that and dive further in.
That'd be awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. I feel filled up just from hanging out and seeing you in person. So I really appreciate you making the time.
Thanks for having me.
If you'd like to learn more about how to book Dorsey Standish for a speaking engagement or company training, you can learn more at dorseystandish.com.